Americans often talk about their right to free speech, but many disagree on what exactly that means. Their arguments devolve into petty screaming matches, and nothing of importance is achieved. To fully understand the purpose of the First Amendment, one must have some context. The year was 1787. The American Revolutionary War had ended 6 years prior, and the fledgling United States government was still struggling to fully establish itself. Leaders from all of the 13 original states gathered in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, for the Constitutional Convention, also known as the Philadelphia Convention. The product of this meeting was the document known as the United States Constitution, the highest document of law recognized in the United States to date. Some states were not satisfied by the Constitution and wanted a more specific wording of the rights to be held by all American citizens before they would ratify the Constitution. Thus, in 1789, James Madison drafted a collection of 12 amendments to the Constitution. 10 of these were ratified, and these first 10 amendments became known as the Bill of Rights. These included the Second Amendment, or the right to keep and bear arms, the Fourth Amendment, which regulates the government's ability to seize property, and the Seventh Amendment, or the right to trial by jury, and many more. The topic of today is the First Amendment. Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of religion, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech, or of the press, or the right of the people peaceably to assemble, and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. Such declaration of guaranteed rights for all citizens had never been provided by any government before, setting a new standard for personal freedom. Fast forward to 2017. Radio, television, the internet, and social media have created an age of unprecedented communication. Private citizens can broadcast themselves across the globe at will. Media created in one nation can freely travel unfiltered from nation to nation. Every individual's voice has become more powerful than ever before. But not all is well in what should be a golden age of communication and information. On the coattails of one of the most polarizing presidential elections to ever take place in the United States, both the conservative right and the progressive left cry foul and claim censorship. In the next half hour, you will hear the opinions and perspectives of several different individuals on First Amendment rights, perspectives on the freedoms of speech, press, religion, assembly, and petitioning. Watch, listen, understand. Then decide how you feel about the American freedoms protected under the First. As you probably know, active duty military personnel cannot be as free with their words as the rest of us. I spoke with Bill Gustafson, a U.S. Army National Guard veteran, about how free speech works inside the military. What does comments in uniform mean?
If you're in uniform, a lot of times you have to be careful what you say. I use the word a gag order, but it's basically a security. You can't disclose what your thoughts are because you're wearing that uniform. In other words, you're representing your country, so you can't get up there and badmouth people because you're put on that uniform. You have to act accordingly. Simple thing like walking into a building, you have to take off your hat. It's protocol because you're representing your country and your unit.
Can active duty personnel independently talk to the media?
They frown on it because you could give out vital information they don't want the enemy to know, especially if you're in combat. If the media starts asking questions, you gotta kind of hesitate because if you let the enemy know, you're basically letting the world know what you're up to. So it's got to be a, kind of a gag order you have because you don't want to talk to the media because you could give vital information away. In fact, that's why in the military a lot of times the officers and that, they know what's going on, but the soldiers don't. They just take orders because if they get captured, they'll be able to find out what's going on. Otherwise, it's like, you can torture me all you want. I don't know anything. And you really don't.
Why can't active military personnel criticize politicians?
Well, the way, it's like a president, people think of the President of the United States, he's not just the president, even if he's not in the military, he's the chief of staff. In other words, he's the ultimate, he's the head of the military. So to badmouth him is not a good thing. It'd be like telling you're working in a factory or whatever, or industry, and you got a CEO and he's the owner. You don't want to badmouth the guy because he can, get fired. But in this case, because the president, that's disrespect because he's your commander-in-chief. So you have to salute him and treat him with respect regardless of what he says. Because that's part of when you take an oath says go into Iraq, you go into Iraq. You don't question it. You can have a thought, but you can't say, no, I'm not going to do that. And if you do, then you'll be brought up on court-martial. You'll be tried for breaking your oath.
What happens if you say something your commanding officer deems inappropriate?
You can be court-martialed. In other words, you can go in front of a board and they can throw you in the brig, as they call it, in jail. Or they can fine you. There's different things. It's like going AWOL. If you go AWOL and you don't have permission, you can be brought up on charges. In other words, the military, they have a court system too, so you can be prosecuted.
What happens if you discuss classified materials with non-authorized individuals?
You're not allowed to talk about military, especially the high rankings. You're not allowed to talk about anything into the public viewpoint, because if there was somebody, a spy or whatever, like during World War II, even now, Russians, for instance, you could give out valuable information. So you basically, you get a gag order. Be careful what you say. Even when they, even if it's your best friend, you can't talk about it. It's your job,
What happens if you discuss classified materials as a civilian?
Yeah, because you'd have to go up in front of a military court-martial if you give out valuable information. You could be classified as a spy even. It's been done before. And they'll literally bring you up on charges. Especially if you have top secret, you're dealing with bombs or weapons or anything that's crucial that the enemy could use. You gotta be very careful what you say.
What does the freedom of speech mean to you?
It varies. When you use the words free speech, a lot of people in America, they try to intimidate you, especially, how would you call it, court systems or military. I could go on and on. They try to, how would you say, you can't say this, you can't say that. But if you're ever in doubt, and you always have to say my opinion, and if you don't believe you have the right to speak whatever's on your mind, just go to your local cemeteries all over the world, military cemeteries. And even the VA, the veterans, see gentlemen or even women, they gave their all, their wheelchairs, their psychological, PST, I could go on and on and on. They fought for that, so you could have the right to speak. And a lot of people aren't aware of that. They gave their all. And like I said, just count all the graves. Them men died for freedom. And freedom, that's part of it, free speech. As long as you don't threaten anybody or, you got to stress, it's my opinion, you have that right.
Is there anything that people should legally not be able to say?
Well, if you're an American and you love your country, you really don't want to badmouth it, even if they're doing something wrong. But if you want to change it, it's up to you as an individual, because all it takes is one person. I mean, like I was saying before, 25 times to my knowledge, the Constitution's been changed. You could own slaves at one time in America. And it's like, you're kidding me. No, and then they finally said, this is ridiculous. And the same thing with women. Women can't vote. So these are all things that you have to understand. If you don't like something that's going on in your country, then you got to stand up and you got to do it legally, not riot like a lot of people do and go out and throw bottles and burn. You take it to the court system, and if anything, every vote counts. You go out there and get yourself a petition, and you say, hey, do you agree with this? And then you take the next step, and or you can get into politics. It's like if you don't like something that's going on in the school board, they're going to do what they want to do. But if you turn around and get on the school board, you'll have a say. So if everybody gets involved in politics, well, guess what? You can change things. And it's been done before. But people don't, they figured, oh, it ain't going to do any good. It takes one person to get up and say, I don't agree. And then just don't say it. Well, do something about it legally.
What is the difference between a protest and a riot?
It gets out of hand. People are angry. So when you protest and then law enforcement comes over and again they say, well, you can't do this, you can't do that. In other words, sometimes people realize if you want to protest, you have the right to protest peacefully. But then you always get a few that will start throwing bottles or start burning or shooting people. It's totally illogical. That just turns out to be a riot. But it's out of control because the factors are, they're not going according to the law, they're going against the law. but you do have a right to protest. And people don't realize that too, and it's like, really? You have a right peacefully, and they specify that. But if you get out of line and you damage property, you have to be arrested.
How do you feel about flag burning as a form of protest?
Flag burning or any type of disrespect towards the American flag, you have to remember, and flags, they only cover the coffins of our military. They gave their all, but it also, when they go into battle, it represents our country. And Donald Trump uses a perfect, we're going to be great again. We always were great. And people have to understand that men and women in the past, they gave their all. That's what America's all about. And to disrespect that flag is just totally unacceptable. To burn it or step on it or you name it, it's just wrong.
Should there be legal repercussions?
No, there's have to be legal because you have to deal with it. It's like burning the cross. Do you really want to burn it? Because if there's a God, you're going to have to answer to him. And to be disrespectful, there might be a lot of veterans out there, and they're not going to be happy campers if you start burning that flag. You could start a riot, and you don't want to do that. You have to respect it.
The right and the left rarely see completely eye to eye. To expose the different viewpoints of both groups, I asked the same 12 questions to Kyle Schrader of the Carroll Republicans and Henderson Kearns of the Carroll Democrats. What does the freedom of speech mean to you?
Freedom of speech is easily the number one civil liberty that we have in this country. It means that we are able to say what we want to say and not be scrutinized by our government for it. And it just gives us that natural, just being able to just speak our minds and not be in fear that somebody's going to come and take us away.
It's the overall freedom of expression to where people can commit an action, whether that be following religion, speech, or something more physical, that they have the freedom to do that.
What does the freedom of the press mean to you?
The freedom of the press is so that journalists have the right to actually investigate and do their job to get what is going on out to the public.
I ultimately want to actually go into journalism with my majors now and be able to write. So that, just me being able to express my freedom of speech and freedom of press in written form, and also on the internet now in the day of social media, just being able to speak your mind now on paper and also on the internet is very big, and it's a privilege in this country to be able to do, because you're not able to do that in countries like China, where they limit what you're able to write on social media and in the press.
What does the freedom of religion mean to you?
Me, I'm a Christian, so me being able to practice my religion however and wherever I want, it means really everything to me as a Christian in this country, and even for people who don't share the same faiths, because I believe that if you want to protect your freedom of religion, you have to protect all religions as well, whether it's Muslim, whether it's Jewish, whether it's Catholic. Really everything should be protected because of our freedom of religion.
The freedom of religion means to actually practice what you believe without it being infringed upon by others.
What does the right to peaceably assemble mean to you?
To get together in order to push your agenda, your beliefs, and to do that with others.
I think that it's a very big part of our culture, and it has been through the civil rights movement, and now even with the left protesting Trump. I think it's a very obscure thing to other countries to be able to see, oh, they're rioting and they're protesting, because it's not normal to them. But to us, it should be, oh, they're speaking their minds, and they're able to do that without riot police shooting at them and taking them away just for assembling, not necessarily being the rioting part. Just simply assembling and picketing, you're able to do that without fear of somebody coming and arresting you.
What does the right to petition mean to you?
The right to petition, I think, is very another obscure thing in our country, because we're able to write and speak our minds to the people who rule over us. And in communist countries, you can't do that. So in our democracy, in our republic. We're able to voice our opinions directly to our leaders and to our senators and representatives, even governors, and then also even all the way up to the White House. And I think that's a very big part of this amendment.
The ability to have your own opinion and to question what is going on in the government so that you can hopefully make a difference on your own.
Do you think free speech is a partisan issue?
No, I wouldn't call it an issue at all. I believe that everyone should have the right to their own opinion and that they should be able to follow suit with that.
I don't think it is to 90% of the country. For the majority of Americans and to myself, it shouldn't be a partisan issue because of the civil liberty and because of the Bill of Rights. I think every civil liberty is not a partisan issue. But to that 10%, I feel it has become where you're shutting down people because they simply have a different view than you. Like you see the protests in Berkeley, California, where they're just shutting them down simply not because of the person who they are, but because they just don't share the same beliefs as them. And that then becomes a partisan issue in of itself.
Do you think there's anything that people should legally not be able to say?
I think that's a slippery slope to get down, because who decides what should and shouldn't be legally okay to say? Obviously, hate speech can be in that debate, but what's hate speech? I think it's just a slippery slope that I don't really think that we should get onto, because ultimately to protect freedom of speech is to protect every speech. And obviously when somebody throws out hate speech, it raises up a red flag to people, and it ruins your reputation and the way people view you. But to make it completely illegal for this hate speech or for certain speech to be illegal, I think it's just a slippery slope to get down as government, because who decides? Is it the right that decides? Is it the left that decides? It's just whoever's in power. Because then you could just be like, oh, this isn't appropriate speech because it doesn't line up with my views and my policies, and that's when you get down that road where it could just lead to tyranny at a point.
People should not be able to infringe upon others' ability not to say things. That's less about not being able to say it and more about the actual ability to perform an action. But you should not be able to infringe on others.
Should the U.S. ever have any kind of blasphemy laws?
No, I believe people should be able to say what they believe, although it would be better to have that regulated while on public broadcasts, because that kind of speech could be very dangerous and inspiring to others, even if it's not true.
I don't think so, because it gets on that point again of hate speech and speech that should be and shouldn't be illegal. It's just a slippery slope, and obviously there's no space for that in society in itself, and as human beings to another human being, just because they have different religious views. And when you start to put laws on not saying certain things, then why can't you just put blasphemy laws on something such as going against a political view or sexual orientation view or anything of that such? So that just is another slippery slope that I don't think America should go towards, just because of our Bill of Rights and our freedom of speech.
What is the difference between a protest and a riot?
Protest is just people speaking their First Amendment rights, their right to assemble and speak their minds in masses. Then a riot is when they become violent, when they either attack businesses, when they damage businesses' property, or even they assault people, which we have seen in probably the last year. Riots are happening more and more in this country.
A riot is when some form of physical act, violence, or vandalism occurs.
How do you feel about protests?
I love protests. It's a great way for people to get out and share their beliefs or their grievances with the rest of the world. It drives up activism, would be the best word to use, and it essentially makes people more aware of that topic or issue.
Protests are a good thing. When we, no matter what our views are able to go out and speak our minds and have that mainstream media come in, get their cameras on those people, and they're able to voice their mind in masses. Because if one person just writes a letter to a senator, what are the chances that actually gets read. But when people are out in front of the town hall or the state capitol or even our nation's White House, I feel like that speaks more in numbers than it does just the single person, or even if all those people are still talking, but they're doing it one by one. It's just a difference in the masses.
How do you feel about flag burning as a form of protest?
I think flag burning, yes, it's constitutional and it's a freedom of speech. Me personally, I think it's an atrocity in this country to have people veterans and people who are in the military have gone over and they fought for that flag, for their right to be able to do that. Yes, it's their right, but I don't believe that it's right to do, in a sense, where it's more of a societal thing. When you're burning a flag that's giving you the opportunity to actually burn that flag, I think it's almost a hypocrisy type thing.
Flag burning, while I disagree with it and a lot of people disagree with it, it is something that people should be able to do and able to show their grievances with the current society.
Should speech be treated the same across TV, radio, the internet, and the spoken word?
Part of me wants to say yes. Everyone should be able to say something and get it out there. The only issue comes into who are they reaching with that message, and can it potentially lead to dangerous effects or inspire people to do something aggressive in nature. So I want to say yes, but the truth is I don't know.
We treat it the same way because it's all freedom of speech. It's just the way that you're expressing it, whether it's in front of a camera or it's behind a keyboard or it's written in a journal or if it's just said in public. It's all still freedom of speech. Obviously, if you're talking to mainstream media and millions of people are going to see it, you're going to talk differently just because of the medium that you're on. But should it be treated differently as a governmental way and a societal way? No, people should be able to speak their minds, how they want, where they want, and when they want.
Free speech is a long-standing topic of interest in the US and abroad. Here's a compilation of some historical figures' viewpoints on free speech.
Free speech means the right to shout theater in a crowded fire.
Better a thousandfold abuse of free speech than denial of free speech.
I disapprove of what you say, but I will defend to the death your right to say it.
Freedom of speech does not protect you from the consequences of saying stupid.
To suppress free speech is a double wrong. It violates the rights of the hearer as well as those of the speaker.
A free press is one that prints a dictator's speech, but doesn't have to. Some people's idea of free speech is that they are free to say what they like, but if anyone says anything back, that is an outrage. Free speech carries with it some freedom to listen.
Freedom of speech means nothing to a people who are too weak in their convictions to speak out against the evil that is eating at the heart of the nation like a cancer.
I believe in freedom of speech, but I also believe we should also have the right to comment on the freedom of speech.
Ignorant free speech often works against the speaker. That is one of the several reasons why it must be given rein instead of suppressed.
The remedy for the abuse of free speech is more speech.
Without freedom of thought, there can be no such thing as wisdom, and no such thing as public liberty without freedom of speech.
Free speech is the bedrock of liberty and free society, and yes, it includes the right to blaspheme and offend.
Give me the liberty to know, to utter, and to argue freely according to conscience above all liberties. If the freedom of speech is taken away, then dumb and silent we may be led, like sheep to the slaughter. None but the dead have free speech. If we don't believe in freedom of speech for people we despise, we don't believe in it at all. It is by the goodness of God that in our country we have those three unspeakably precious things: freedom of speech, freedom of conscience, and the prudence never to practice either of them. If liberty means anything at all, It means the right to tell people what they do not want to hear. Americans' right to free speech should not be proportionate to their bank accounts.
The truth is, libraries are raucous clubhouses for free speech, controversy, and community.
The First Amendment ensures not that speech will be fair, but that it will be free. It cannot be both. You've heard the viewpoints out there. So, what does the First Amendment mean to you?